My first ever date with Rachel was at Pizza Express in Charing Cross, and she got a banana pizza. I know that because every time we go to Pizza Express, she gets that goat's cheese pizza and she loves it. Meals often bring back all sorts of memories, and we usually celebrate special occasions with meals, whether it's the big wedding breakfast that we have, whether it is birthday cake and all the celebrations. I'm a big Colin the Caterpillar fan myself. Whether it is Christmas and all the trimmings that come at Christmas. Today we're looking at Exodus chapter 12 and the story of the Passover. And I'd encourage you, after watching this video, to go and read verses 1 to 28. But the final verses say this: "Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, 'What does this ceremony mean to you?' then tell them, 'It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians.' Then the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron." There are a couple of things that are really striking about this story. One is the fear and the faith of the Israelites as they celebrated this. God has brought these devastating plagues on Egypt. And each plague, in loads of different ways, corresponds to different gods that the Egyptians worshipped. And God shows that he is supreme above all of them. And the Israelites, as they saw this, can imagine it must have been terrifying to live through those plagues. And yet they must have had so much faith and confidence in God after seeing how much bigger than any other god or idol he is. There's also this sense of them having gone through this journey where Moses and Aaron keep going to Pharaoh and saying, "Let my people go," and Pharaoh either flat out refusing or saying yes and changing his mind. And when they're told, "Right, don't put leaven in your bread because you haven't got time. Eat this meal, stood up, tuck your clothes in, get ready, get your shoes on, be in that place where you can leave quickly." I reckon again they'd have had fear and faith. What would it mean for some of them to leave a land that was all they ever knew, to take on a land that they had never been to call a place undiscovered home? What would it mean for them to really trust that actually this time Pharaoh was going to let them go, or God was going to bring them out? Can you imagine all the swirling fear and faith in that season? How would they respond? And then the meal itself is fascinating, isn't it? It brings hope and the sense of, wow, let's celebrate together and let's be ready. And yet at the same time, half of the meal is also smeared across the door frames. As you are celebrating, your enemies will go through real loss and pain. Fear and faith mixing up in that. I think the other thing that's really interesting is that before this has even happened, God is telling them how to celebrate it. That's a really, really rich detail about this story, that God spends more time teaching them, it seems, how they will celebrate what has happened than explaining what will happen and why. And there's this sense that actually we're called to live from a place of knowing what God is doing, of being alive in all of our fears, alive with faith, ready to take on that which God is calling us to in the future. This was a whole mixed community. Children who probably didn't want to leave home. Old people who had grown old in the land of Egypt, who worried about the journey. Moses himself was not a young man at this time, probably 80 plus. I mean, how would you feel in this situation? It's a really, really rich image. And it's central to the identity of the people of God, sharing this meal, enjoying this meal. It's so central that Jesus turns this meal and shows how actually all of the richness, all of the hopes and dreams and vibrancy, all that it reveals about the character of God and his greatness is a shadow of him. It points to him. In the Gospel of John, Jesus' ministry is centered around 3 Passover meals. In the first Passover meal, Jesus goes in, and while everyone is celebrating the festival of Passover in the temple, he turns over the tables and drives out the cattle with whips. And there's this sense of Jesus saying, you have forgotten. You are celebrating, but you're not remembering. You're celebrating the nationalism and the fervour of what this festival represents, but you're missing the justice and the hope of God. You've turned it into a place where people are scheming and plotting. You've turned it into a place where people are changing money, and that is not the heart of God. The second Passover is when Jesus, in the Gospel of John, feeds the 5,000. And there's a whole dialogue and passage there where Jesus feeding the 5,000 is a real trigger to some of the events where the crowd's not sure how to relate to him. They want the food, they want the signs, they want to make him king by force. But Jesus is trying to teach them really who God is. And he's saying, actually, I am like the manna that the Israelites received in the wilderness on the other side of this. I am the promised land that you will come into. I am the rest. I am the promise that all of these things were always pointing to. And they just don't get it. And the final Passover in John comes as Jesus is the Passover lamb. He is the one who is slaughtered. His blood is put over us that the consequences of our sin and wickedness and rebellion would pass over us. He is the one who is given in order that we might walk in freedom. So remember that today. As you share your meals, as you talk with your friends, share in the goodness of God, in the fear and faith of this time, as we are 2 days in a more restrictive tier, looking forward to a Christmas like no other. What is God saying to you about who he is in this season?